All right, it is Wednesday. It is December, and I am here with the lovely Anna Navarro and Cha-Cha, the even lovelier Cha-Cha.
What do you mean she's even lovelier?
Oh, who would disagree? Come on, look how cute that kid is.
Yeah, she is with her little jacket, puff parka.
Oh, look at her. All right, let's jump right into things. That's what people want. Let's give the people what they want, Anna Navarro. We haven't discussed this, but the White House recently featured you on their website on a page called Wall of Shame, where they reference, they're calling out what they say are media offenders. I think this is going to be a weekly occurrence where they put people out there. Naturally, I was interested to see if we made the list anywhere, and I checked, and you were there. Specifically, they reference your comments from discussing the migrant detention center in Florida, nicknamed Alligator Alcatraz. What was your reaction to this?
First, I think it's the most immature thing in the world for the White House, for an administration that is dealing with so many problems, to be putting out a wall of shame. And I don't know if they understand how much it means for people who are on that wall of shame and how they consider it a wall of honor. It is a badge of honor anytime I get attacked by the White House. I love knowing that despite the fact they call us irrelevant, we are so relevant that we are on that wall of shame, because Whoopi was on it too.
Whoopi was on it for singing a song about the ballroom.
Yes. Remember when she broke into that song, "You Don't Own This"? It was about the White House. And it's funny. So I mentioned, so Whoopi had no idea about this wall of shame, and she had no idea she was on it.
Yeah, I neglected to tell her.
I mentioned it to her today, and she couldn't remember the song. And then Joy overheard us talking about it, and her reaction was like, "And I'm not on it? Oh, I want to be on it. I want to be on the wall of shame." So White House, if you are listening, please put Joy Behar on your wall of shame, because she would like that badge of honor. Please, put it on my obituary.
Don't
Anna Navarro was on Trump's White House wall of shame.
Oh, I have a quick correction. It's the Hall of Shame.
Oh, it's the hall?
Yeah, it's the hall.
Well, okay.
All right.
Hall, wall.
Either way, I'm sure Joy in a matter of time will be on the Hall of Shame as well. All right, we talked about today on the show and all week really, Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth and the White House standing behind these Venezuelan boat strikes. You called it a fabricated war on today's show. Why is this so significant?
And do you remember? It reminds me of a movie. I think it was with Robert De Niro or somewhere, where it was like Wag the Dog.
Wag the Dog. Yep.
So why is this a fabricated war? Okay. As I've said many times, and I firmly believe, Nicolas Maduro is a horrible human being who has sent that country reeling into poverty. He has caused hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of Venezuelans to flee, seeking freedom and justice. They have been in power now for 25 years, because before him was Hugo Chavez. Nicolas Maduro is the successor of Hugo Chavez, and in the same track, in the same vein. A dictator, oppressive, cruel. Right now, as we speak, I know of people who are being held and tortured in Venezuela. So, okay, all of that is true. I think Donald Trump is doing regime change in Venezuela. I think what he wants is to get the credit of getting rid of Maduro. So in order to do regime change in Venezuela, he has concocted, with the help of Marco Rubio and Pete Hegseth, this entire story about Venezuela. Number one, releasing insane people from the asylums and prisoners from the jails, and flooding those into the United States. Brian, that actually happened in 1980 with Cuba. Mm-hmm. It was called the Mariel boat lift. So I think he has heard about this and somehow conflated it and blaming Venezuela for something that there is zero evidence of. There is zero evidence that Venezuela has released people from insane asylums and jails and sent them to the United States. And by the way, the people that the Cubans, the Marielitos, they were called initially, and there was kind of like a despective term, the folks that left through the Mariel boat lift. And I remember this, distinctly, because it was a really big deal in Miami. I was an 8-year-old kid, but it was all about what was happening. So Fidel Castro opened up the jails, and the insane asylums. And he said and then there was a boat lift where Cubans from Miami were allowed to go pick up their families, but they were only allowed to take their family members on boats. So there was like all these flotillas of boats heading towards Cuba to go rescue family members from Cuba. The only way they would allow you to take your family is if you put some of those insane people and people released from jails in the boats with you and took them back to Miami. That is not happening in Venezuela. That has not happened in Venezuela. If there was any evidence that insane people or people from jail, common criminals, had been released and sent to the United States, do you not think we would have been shown those people and that they would have been highlighted and there'd be news about them? There is zero evidence of that. So number one, he's blaming that as part of the reason to go into Venezuela. And then he's also concocted this story about drug trafficking in Venezuela. Venezuela does serve as a pass-through for drugs that are made, cocaine that is made in Colombia. But those drugs mostly end up in Europe. It is a very small fraction of drugs that come into the United States that actually originate from Venezuela.
You said that on the show the other day, and I hadn't heard that. I didn't realize that before. Yeah.
Okay, well,
I'm not doubting it. I just didn't know.
The drugs are coming, out of Colombia through the Pacific coast up into Central America, and then make their way up through land, Central America and Mexico. And what's really killing Americans by the thousands, there's so many families that have been touched by this, is fentanyl. Yeah. And fentanyl is coming from Mexico. It is not made in Venezuela. It is not trafficked in Venezuela. It does not go through Venezuela. It mostly comes through the border, and it comes through Mexico. And so these two excuses that he is using in order to go to war with Venezuela are made up. It is not made up that Nicolas Maduro is corrupt, is a criminal mind, that he oppresses his people. He is anti-American. He destabilizes the entire region. Mm-hmm. He is a bad guy. If he leaves, is killed, is somehow out of power, I assure you there will be dancing in the streets of Miami. There will be celebrating in the streets of Miami, and I will be one of those people celebrating that he is out of Venezuela, because there's so many people that for now over 2 decades have been suffering the effects of having this dictator as head of Venezuela. But they're lying to us. What Donald Trump is doing is lying to us, because if he were to say, I want regime change, what American in Nebraska or Omaha do you think is okay with having a fourth of the arsenal of the U.S. Navy off the coast of Venezuela at a cost of tens, if not hundreds of millions? What person would be okay with dropping drones and,
but
on these boats?
Why is this so important to him, do we think? Of all the international things he's working on and all the crises in the world.
Why Venezuela?
Yeah.
Well, I think, first of all, because it's...
why is regime change there so important to him?
Because, first, I think it's Marco Rubio. Mm-hmm. Listen, in South Florida, this is a big deal.
Yeah.
In South Florida, we'd like to get rid of Ortega, Maduro, and Díaz-Canel, who is the Castro disciple in Cuba. So in our community, it's a big deal. I also think that, he's read about things like Bush getting rid of Noriega in Panama, mm-hmm. like Reagan invading Grenada.
You think it's a source of strength for him?
I think it's that idea of the Teddy Roosevelt type of diplomacy, carry a big stick, gunboat diplomacy. Why do I think he's obsessed with this? Because, number one, it serves as a great distraction. Number two, it would probably be a good thing to get rid of Maduro. Mm-hmm. And unlike where there's been regime change in the past, in Venezuela there were actually elections that Maduro lost and refused to accept the defeat, mm-hmm. and stayed there through sheer will and power. So there is a woman, Maria Corina Machado, her party won, the opposition leader who just won the Nobel Peace Prize, who, if Maduro left, probably would be the one to step in, either her or somebody from her party, to take over as president because that they legitimately won the election. But so why Venezuela? Because they've got oil, because they can, right? It's not like taking on Russia. It's, it's taking on a country that, has some military power, but they're, a David versus Goliath in comparison to the United States. Because I think it would be meaningful to a community in South Florida that supported him overwhelmingly, because it's a distraction. I mean, there's, I think, so many reasons. The thing I see now is that he is so invested in this. The amount of warships we have off the coast.
That's the thing, yeah.
That I don't see how he leaves there, unless Maduro is out. I think that they thought Maduro would be easier to get rid of. I think they thought Maduro would be in exile by now. Maduro would have gotten afraid, like many dictators do. They fleece the country and they leave with their family and their bags of money on a plane into exile somewhere and live out their lives. We saw, Baby Doc Duvalier do that. We saw Somoza from Nicaragua.
That's my plan for leaving the show. Yeah.
With bags of money and your
family.
And
my family, and no one will ever hear from me again.
Well, and so I think they thought if this guy's gonna get scared, we're gonna, send these ships in. He's gonna see these U.S. aircraft carriers off the coast of Venezuela. We're gonna start dropping bombs and drones on Venezuelan boats. We're going to call him and we're gonna tell him, buddy, if you want to leave with your life and your money and your family, you need to leave now. And Maduro has so far resisted. I'm not sure he will continue to resist, but so far he has resisted. The problem is, as I said, I think he's now so invested in this that that if Maduro continues to resist, I don't see how Trump says, I'm going to just, take my warships now and go home and leave Maduro be. So at this point, he is so far into this fabricated conflict that the only way I see this not ending in either military strikes in Venezuela or Maduro leaving is if Congress actually gets off their ass and does their job of oversight and says, you cannot do this unless we give congressional approval. And it is one of the few things where you are seeing Republicans, including the chairs of the committees of jurisdiction, push back and want answers and investigations on this, on this second strike of this boat, which is ridiculous. It is a war crime without a war, because we are not at war with Venezuela, and they keep referring to these boats as a threat. We had to strike it a second time because the threat was still there. The threat to who? These boats were in the Caribbean off the coast of Trinidad and Tobago. They were not, in Miami waters. The threat of what? A 20-foot boat?
Yeah. No, we'll hopefully get some more answers, and maybe we'll see the video of what happened that day. All right, I want to pivot a little bit, because earlier this week we discussed...
And remember that at the same time he's doing all of this stuff on Venezuela, he is also taking away temporary protective status from Venezuelans and leaving hundreds of Venezuelans that fled Maduro and are in the United States working legally and being decent people, leaving them with no option, sending them to this country that is so bad that he's about to bomb. And let's also remember that at the same time, he is fabricating this entire war against Venezuela, allegedly based on drug trafficking. He just 5 days ago pardoned the former president of Honduras, Juan Orlando Hernandez, who did participate in drug trafficking.
And was convicted.
And that really was drugs that flooded the streets of the United States. This is a guy who allowed drugs in that preferred path, Colombia through Central America, to pass through his country en route to the United States. And he boasted about the fact that he was going to have cocaine shoved up the noses of the gringos. He took a bribe from El Chapo, a guy from Narcos, one of the worst drug dealers in history, to allow those drugs to pass. And this guy, who was serving a 45-year sentence in U.S. federal prison, he just pardoned. So make it make sense. Make it make sense. It is demented. What he is doing is demented.
All right. Earlier this week, we discussed President Trump's attacks on Minnesota Governor Tim Walz. He called him a slur for people with disabilities. You brought up your older brother, and this really resonated with our viewers. And I know it understandably makes you emotional, but I wanted to talk to you a little bit about it.
Well, look, I have an older brother. He's 8 years older than I am. His name is Daniel Antonio Navarro. And my brother is completely low-functioning autistic. He is self-injurious. That means that he hits himself. That means that he injures himself. That means I grew up watching my brother, in the child's pose, hitting his forehead against the floor over and over again in a repetitive fashion. I grew up having to rush my brother to the hospital because he'd hit his head against a window, and the gash was so big we needed to rush him to the hospital. I mean, it was a very difficult time growing up with my brother, and I grew up seeing my brother being imitated, mimicked by children. Whenever we would be out, my brother makes gestures, he makes sounds, and a lot of times, you would see little kids just staring at him and mimicking some of those sounds and those gestures, which was incredibly hurtful for a family. And so often I would see the parents of those children go up to their children and explain to them, this is a disabled person. We don't make fun of disabled people. We don't make light of it. This is a human being, and we don't do that. I would hear the parents talking to the children. And so to see the President of the United States making light of slurs against the intellectually disabled is just so disgusting and unacceptable. And, this comes in the heels of when in the first campaign, he made fun. He did what those little children would do, mimic the gestures and sounds of a disabled person.
Yeah, I remember.
I still to this day do not understand how that wasn't the end of Donald Trump's campaign. This came before Access Hollywood. How could Republicans, many of them Bible-clutching, God-fearing Christians, have voted for a man who bullies and mimics and picks on the most vulnerable amongst us in our society? I mean, if nothing else shows you what a dark human being, what a dark heart he has, his lack of empathy, his lack of humanity, that should have shown you that. And yet, people still voted for him. Not once, but 3 times. I mean, it's just inexplicable to me that he can still, at this age, think that making fun of somebody and using those slurs is okay.
Yeah. Speaking of family, how was your Thanksgiving?
I did nothing. I have become America's guest.
Yes.
I used to host these elaborate Thanksgivings, elaborate Christmas celebrations. My mom died December 14th, and 3 years ago. And frankly, the holidays have become a little dicey for me since then. I think a lot of people go through the same thing. So I kind of run away right now from celebrating, and I'm rather enjoying not being the hostess with the mostest. I am enjoying being the guest who brings a side dish and doesn't have to worry about linens and decoration and plates, and
it's a lot of work. I have such respect for people that host and
how many people show up at yours?
Well, so we alternate. We do my in-laws in Virginia one year, and then we do my family the next. And the one with my family is kind of thinned out a little bit, so there aren't as many people for there. In with my in-laws, there was a full house. It was Heather's aunt and cousins, adult cousins, and her brother and those kids and stuff like that. So it was 14, 15 people, I think. And then they have like visitors that pop in and things like that, neighbors, and it's a full affair.
So I stayed in Florida, which is lovely this time of year. I went to my sister-in-law's for an early lunch, and she had worked really hard, and she had cooked everything. And then I went to a friend's house for dinner, who lived close by to my sister-in-law. And it was the best thing in the world to be able to get up and leave and not have to worry about leftovers and trash and a dirty house and all of those things. It was great.
Yeah. The week before Thanksgiving, you moderated a conversation with former Vice President Kamala Harris. It was in Miami. Tell me about it.
Well, so she had asked me to. She was on a book tour.
Yeah.
She came here for that book, 107 Days.
Yes.
New York Times bestseller. And she had asked me months ago, before the book came out, if I would moderate a conversation with her in Miami as part of her book tour. It was the last stop. The place was sold out. 3,000 people at a giant, beautiful.
So she's still drawing people that are very excited to see her.
Listen, I was overwhelmed by the reaction. People out there in America are so thirsty for joy, for leadership, for guidance, for words on how to get through this and what we can do as individuals. I asked her if she was going to run again. A lot of times I feel like she gets completely discounted as a possible candidate in 2028. The truth is, our history is full of people who've run once, twice, 3 times.
Look at President
Donald Trump
Yeah.
ran 4 times. Mitt Romney ran twice. John McCain ran twice. Hillary Clinton ran twice.
Nixon.
Joe Biden ran 4 times.
Yeah.
Well, 3.5 maybe. And so, I asked her that. Of course, she wouldn't answer, but I said, well, you know what?
She
Where's
didn't
the
say no
timeline?
either. Yeah.
You know what really caught me and really touched me was the amount of young people that showed up wanting to know how they can make a difference. And that always recharges my battery.
Yeah.
When I see these young people who are not jaded and really want to make a difference and make the world better.
What's your gut right now? Do you think she runs again?
I don't. I may be wrong about that, and I think she's going to, she's going to hold out for a long time because it helps to sell books and get speaking engagements. She talked about what a tax it takes on your family, on your family life, on your personal life. She said, look, it's, running for president looks easier than it is. So I don't know that she will do it again. She certainly, I think, burnt a lot of bridges with that book. All of that said, what I saw in that room of 3,000 people in Miami at 8 o'clock at night on a Thursday night is people that would follow her.
Yeah, passion and excitement
anywhere.
About her. Yeah.
And I think there's a lot of what could have been, what should have been. She's just so incredibly smart. There was one guy who shouted out, "Talk to us about joy." And because, she always talked about a joyful campaign.
Yeah.
She talked about the need of finding balance in these times, of being engaged and pushing back and doing everything we can as individuals, but also protecting your peace and, your person. I asked her the question. She didn't like it. She pushed back. I asked her the question about what Michelle Obama
I was curious. Yeah.
had said, that this country was not ready for a female president. And she, I don't think she wanted to get caught into a back and forth with Michelle Obama, who would.
No.
But she, she very much rejects
that idea. She
that
thinks
idea,
it's not
that
about-
notion. She basically says you can't make that judgment based on my campaign, which was a truncated 107-day campaign, and I am not going to tell little girls, and definitely, or much less little girls of color, that they are out of the game ab initio.
Yeah.
That's Latin for from the start.
I actually knew that. All right. Thank you for joining me today, Anna Navarro and Chacha. Tomorrow, I'm back with a special guest. Stephen A. Smith will be on The View and then joining us here on the podcast, and we'll see you then.